The early 2000s era of LEGO, whatever its flaws, gave us some truly remarkable stuff. Some truly unique things that we haven't seen since and will never see again. One of my all-time favorite themes, of course, Harry Potter, was introduced in this era starting in 2001. And the Harry Potter figures that came out during those first 3 years of the theme are drastically different than the ones you are familiar with today. Even though most of these figures are already 2 decades old at the time of filming this, I think this collection of characters brings something really unique not only to the theme of LEGO Harry Potter, but to LEGO as a whole. And they definitely deserve some appreciation. So let's take a closer look. Now, before we dive into each figure individually, there's some things that I want to just get out of the way right away that I really appreciate about the 2001 to 2003 lineup of Harry Potter figures. There is an undeniable charm to the yellow skin tone of these minifigures. These figures could populate your LEGO city and blend in just fine. There's a remarkable consistency about the characters here. I would believe some of that is just due to the fact that LEGO had less graphic designers at the time, less cooks in the kitchen when producing these things, and the style is very consistent. And despite this only encompassing 3 years, the third year hardly counting with 2 sets, I feel like you get an incredible assortment of figures here. You can pretty effectively tell the story of those first 2 books, movies. Well, we gotta start out with Harry Potter. I'm not gonna dwell on him too much. I do have a video looking at every single Harry Potter minifigure produced in the first 20 years of the theme, and all 8 of these guys are already covered in that. Right away with the Harry and the Gryffindor robes, I need to point out the amazing fact that a huge chunk of these characters came with capes, printed capes at that, which is not something we get with the modern figures. As great as the modern figures look, the cape does add something really special here. The next Harry is just slightly different. He's wearing generic Hogwarts robes. These are the robes you would have seen when they are getting sorted, and in that scene where Harry meets Draco for the first time. This torso print would be reused on Hermione as well. Next up is just another slight modification. This Harry has a violet robe, meant, as I understand, to represent the invisibility cloak. However, that bright color just kind of makes him all the more visible. This next Harry is kind of a generic Harry. He shows up in a couple sets. I couldn't really find a perfect match for this costume. If you can, let me know. This torso print was recolored in the 2004 wave twice, I believe, which is kind of fun. The next Harry has his red plaid shirt. This torso is exclusive to this figure. They were trying to replicate the look from the flying car incident when Harry and Ron are making their way to Hogwarts in the Chamber of Secrets. And actually, it's pretty good. I love that they followed the source material so closely, but also kept it looking very LEGO-like. Next figure up is one of our only 2003 Harrys. He's got a sand green sweater. He comes with a Nocturne Alley set, in which, of course, he's wearing his Hogwarts robes already, so I really don't know why this exclusive torso print was made for this character, but hey, glad to have it anyway. Mine was cracked, very sad. Seller didn't mention it on Bricklink. The next Harry is taken from the Forbidden Forest set from 2002, and you can see both Harry and Ron here, and honestly, that's really good for 2002. Couldn't ask for much more there. Our last Harry is Quidditch Harry. Again, it's a very close look to what you got in the movies. It's great stuff. We got 4 runs between 2001 and 2002. Of course, we got the generic Gryffindor robed one with that starry cape again. He's got a wand in old light gray. Most noteworthy about this character, perhaps, is the hair color, which is a color called Earth Orange, a since discontinued color. The last time we saw Earth Orange was in a croissant in 2005. The next run is the one from the Forbidden Forest set in 2002. Another great costume match, perhaps one of my favorites. Kind of looks like me today. That's fantastic. The next 2 are very similar. Again, using a costume I wasn't exactly able to find the reference for in the movies. If you can find it, awesome, let me know. One of them does not have a cape, and one of them does have the starry cape. Face prints and everything throughout these 4 characters remain the same. But all in all, not a terrible likeness to Rupert Grint. back in 2001. We've got to talk about Hermione, of course, the last of the trio. Of course, we get the generic robed version of her. That hairpiece was introduced especially for her, would be later discontinued, unfortunately. She has a tan one, which used to be quite hard to come by. She was also included in the original Hogwarts Express set with her generic Hogwarts robes, which of course is accurate to the movie. And there's one more variant, again, one that I don't really know what costume it's trying to represent. This one came with one of the, I believe it was Diagon Alley shops. One of these Harry Potter for girls styled sets, which are just some of the coolest sets. And maybe one day I will open this beautiful, beautiful package, but not today. Comparing Hermione to Ron and Harry, I think shows that LEGO hadn't quite figured out how to do female characters in LEGO just yet. That would take a few more years, perhaps a decade. Next up is a great one, glow-in-the-dark head Snape. This is one of the few figures of these early sets that had printed legs, which is pretty cool. He's got a dark gray, that's old dark gray, wand, a cape without the stars, and that subtle purple printing is quite nice. The Snape actually released in 2004 would also feature a glow-in-the-dark head with slightly updated, brighter printing. This next figure is perhaps my favorite, and he is the most expensive. It is Gilderoy Lockhart. It is the only sand red figure ever produced besides the Geonosian battle droid. Compared to the source material, spot on. This hairpiece was introduced in 2002 for the Lockhart character. So his wand color there is actually dark nougat, one of the rarest LEGO colors. Only 3 pieces were ever produced in that color. So you get the 4-long bar here, another 4-long bar with the flute print on it from the old Fluffy Encounter set, and then one of those classic male hair pieces. There is one other Lockhart figure, which I think is just fantastic. Interestingly enough, different wand color for this one is just regular tan wand. This is the Dueling Club variant, mimicking another one of Lockhart's fantastic costumes from the movies. Crazy that we wouldn't see another Lockhart figure until we got that direct-to-consumer Diagon Alley almost 20 years later. Our one and only Ginny minifigure, who also came with the big Chamber of Secrets set. Fun to get yet another hairpiece in that earth orange color for Ginny, which I think works just fine. Dumbledore is another great figure. One of the only other ones to, again, include that wonderful, wonderful leg printing. So what's really interesting about this figure, again, is the color, which is original purple. It's listed on Bricklink as just purple. The purple we have now is called dark purple. The only other figure to be produced in purple is Squirrel, who of course is on this stand as well. His hairpiece was introduced for this figure, though that beard piece had shown up in some sets from 1993. Some castle sets with a wizard, of course, but typically he featured the wizard's hat instead of the hairpiece. I believe the last time we saw that hairpiece was from Gandalf in Lord of the Rings in 2013. We'll see if it ever comes back. Next up is McGonagall. McGonagall was introduced in the Dumbledore's Office set, which is just an awesome, awesome set. This figure has a printed dress piece as well. It makes her stand a little bit taller. It is simply a 2x2 by 2 bricks tall slope with a print on the front. That's how dress pieces were done up until very, very recently. You'll note too that a lot of these figures I have mentioned as being included in 2 sets. A lot of that is just due to the fact that there were these character packs given out with gifts with purchases that included most of these figures another time. So if a figure is included in 2 sets, typically that means they were in the gift with purchase character pack, but mainly exclusive to 1 set. Hagrid, on the other hand, was in all sorts of sets. Hagrid was pretty crazy for his time, completely ditching the original minifigure setup. I'm so glad they did that, and that is stuck. That hair piece, that hair beard combo, I should say, is a rubber piece, and underneath it is a regular minifigure head. He looks pretty accurate to his on-screen appearance, I must say. All right, we should probably talk about Draco. So our first Draco here features some Slytherin robes, very similar to the Gryffindor robes we've seen before, just swapping out the colors for green and that shield for the crest of Slytherin. I've got him here holding the Remember All as well. It's just a print on a trans clear head, and it looks pretty great, honestly. There's 2 more variants of him. One of them is him in his Quidditch robes. Again, very similar to the Gryffindor Quidditch robes, just in green this time around. The 3rd variant of Draco is, again, quite interesting. This one came with quality Quidditch supplies, one of the only 2 2003 sets. Couldn't really find what costume that was meant to represent, as when we see him in Diagon Alley, he's wearing his Slytherin robes. But it was fun to get another Draco variant. It was a strange set to put him in, quality Quidditch supplies of all things, but hey, I'll take it. That's a great set, by the way. Next up are Crabbe and Goyle. These figures are pretty similar to that original Draco we saw with the Slytherin robes. They do have different exclusive face prints, which is pretty great to see, and hair pieces as well. I like both these figures, and again, it was pretty wild that it took almost 20 years to get them in the new updated flesh tones. We actually get 2 variants of Lucius Malfoy as well. They are quite similar. I couldn't find in the movie 2 different costumes worn by Lucius in the Chamber of Secrets. I think the 2nd figure, that is the one released with Nocturne Alley in 2003, is probably a little more accurate with the red accents. The other one came with Dobby's release in 2002, one of the smallest sets of 2002, and he had a cape. I do believe that face print was reused in another set. Madam Hooch is probably the closest they got to doing a female figure right in this series. She came with the Quidditch set from 2002, and we get a printed cape. It's worth noting that I bought this figure used on Bricklink, and the cape clearly has never seen the light of day. It's beautiful. So thanks to whoever sold me that. You made my day when I opened that up. The printing is so good, and honestly, this figure looks quite accurate to the source material. I was kind of wondering about the origins of the hairpiece that they chose for it, which I think is respectable. It was actually introduced the year before in Alpha Team with, I believe, Dash. Dobby is an interesting one for sure. So Dobby's got a rubber head, some terrifying eyes. I mean, the Dobby in Chamber of Secrets is quite terrifying. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but this might be the first instance of a specialized rubber head like that. The only other thing that I can think of is Star Wars. Maybe Yoda showed up before. Regardless of whether or not he was the first, it was still relatively unexplored territory. The sculpting is remarkably good, if not terrifying. I think the lack of printing on the eyes, that stare is intense, right into your soul for sure. It's a very interesting figure, and I'm happy it exists. The other 2 short-legged characters are Goblins from the Gringotts set in 2002. One of them looks remarkably similar to Griphook, even though I do not believe he was actually named as such in the set. The other bears more resemblance to the goblin at the front desk in Gringotts. It's worth noting that these heads are hard plastic. I think they're a little more stable, a little less easy to chip the ears off on these, as they're not as big as Dobby's. That's probably the reasoning for it. That does bring us to our other purple character. It is rather unusual that Quirrell's entire torso is purple, when in the movies it was black with just that turban piece in purple. This figure, of course, too, has the double-sided head with Voldemort on the back. I love it when LEGO gives us nightmare fuel. Dobby might be giving him a run for his money. Peeves was supposed to be in the Harry Potter movies, and it just didn't happen. But we still got his figure. Compared to the Peeves that I remember playing against in the original CD-ROM computer games, pretty boring. All that being said, because he is so boring, he works great as just a generic ghost. The very plain color scheme that even fits into modern sets very easily. One of the coolest figures is not what you'd expect. It's Gryffindor statue. This is again something that can be used even today in a modern version of Hogwarts, and I love that. This figure, because of its just usefulness, has actually tended to be a bit more expensive, and he's got some rare parts on him in that old gray color. This figure is fascinating to me. It is, believe it or not, the Queen from the game of Wizard's Chess in the Sorcerer's Stone. It looks absolutely nothing like the source material. But it gave us some really cool pieces because of that. That chrome Belleville crown. It's really quite interesting that they put a 1x1 cylinder on top, and that's just so that the crown would fit it all. But of course there is no crown in the movie. So I just wondering if they were just referencing earlier source material while they're producing this set. It does look more like a queen perhaps than the more knightly getup that's shown in the movies. Instead of holding a sword, she is simply holding a white 4-long bar. Vernon Dursley in his pajamas here, trying to prevent Harry from escaping out his bedroom window into the flying car. This is one of the first individual minifigures I ever bought. I bought it at the first Brickwhirl. It's very fun that way. I got that figure there. No Petunia or Dudley, unfortunately, but hey, one better than none. I've saved the best for last, though, and that is the Mountain Troll from the Troll on the Loose set from 2002. This is one of the only Sorcerer's Stone sets made in that Chamber of Secrets year. I think Rupert Grint described this character best when he said, "Cool. Talk about specialized." Honestly, it holds up so well. I mean, look at this thing compared to the scene in the movie and tell me that it's not perfect. I think it would have been more accurate perhaps if they had done another specialized head, but I love the fact that it is simply a sand blue minifigure head on top of this crazy piece beneath him. So he's got a little vest. It's actually, it's like a felt material. And then he's got his undergarment as well, which is held up by an elastic waistband, which is barely holding on. The left arm has no articulation whatsoever, but the right arm can be swung up and down. He's got some very unusual connections on the feet, which make him take up about a 3x3 area at the very least. This thing is so good. I'm surprised we haven't seen a remake of this scene with the newer sets. But honestly, the fact that we haven't makes this figure all the more valuable. I have no doubt when that scene does get remade, if it does get remade, they will not top this. And I think he is absolutely essential to any Harry Potter fan's Lego collection. I love these figures. I really do. They are a very special period of Lego Harry Potter history. Honestly, set some terrific groundwork for what would become, of course, one of their most successful themes. Do these figures hold up to the stuff you see today? Probably not, for the most part. But there's a few gems in here. That Mountain Troll, the Gryffindor Knight, Sandred Lockhart, which are just so good, even by today's standards, and are just so unique. Things we'll probably never see again. And that's what makes these figures so special. I hope I've increased your appreciation for these guys. Which 2001 to 2003 Lego Harry Potter minifigure is your favorite? If I had to pick, if the Mountain Troll doesn't count as a figure, it's Sandred Lockhart, because I love Sandred and I love Lockhart. Madam Hooch is another. I could go on and on and on. But if you're here still at the end, you've probably been here long enough, so it's time for me to send you on your way. Have a wonderful life. I will see you next time.